Before he became the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock was just another American getting swallowed by the Great Depression. In 1929, he lost more than a boxing match. He broke his right hand, lost his title shot, and watched his career spiral. That same year, his life savings vanished in a bank collapse. There were no FDIC safety nets. The money simply disappeared. To make matters worse, his investment in a taxi company tanked. Overnight, he went from contender to bust. Desperate to provide for his wife and 3 kids, he fought injured, with broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a right hand so damaged that he once intentionally re-broke it in the ring just so fight doctors could reset it because he couldn't afford to go to the hospital. By 1933, he was walking up to 12 miles a day looking for work on the New Jersey docks. If one pier didn't have openings, he walked to the next. He walked everywhere to save bus fare. He was on government relief at a whopping $24 a month. What he didn't realize at the time was this. All that walking, all that lifting of heavy loads with his good left arm, it was making him strong again, silently, day by day. Then, out of nowhere, he received a second chance. He got a last-minute fight against a rising contender named Corn Griffin. With just 2 days of training, Braddock knocked him out in 3 rounds. That left hand that had once been useless, now, thanks to years of lifting heavy dock equipment, was just as dangerous as his right. One fight led to another, and another. Suddenly, the washed-up long shot found himself squaring off against Max Baer for the world heavyweight title. And he won. But the story doesn't stop there. The first thing Braddock did with his winnings, he paid back every cent of the public relief he'd received, $367.24. That's 13 months' worth. No one asked him to do this. He just believed it was the right thing to do. And it wasn't a one-time gesture. Braddock never forgot the sting of poverty. So he donated regularly to Christian ministries, supported the Catholic worker movement, and frequently invited homeless men to eat dinner at his family's table. He didn't flash his wealth, he didn't chase luxury, he bought a modest home for his family. And when his boxing career ended, he used his earnings to buy construction equipment and work honest jobs at New York building sites. In Braddock, depression-weary Americans saw a man who fought not just for a title, but for dignity, provision, and family. And that's the kind of prosperity we're talking about today. Not overnight wealth, not fame or flash, but the kind of steady, faithful, lived-out prosperity that starts in struggle, grows through discipline, and ends in legacy. Welcome to Plan to Prosper, where we exist to honor God by helping faithful servants steward their finances wisely to build wealth that endures for generations. All right, Logan, we are back for episode 4 of Plan to Prosper. How are we feeling today?
Feeling good. On a personal note, it's looking like I haven't got a text or anything yet, but looking like I'm going to be an uncle for the 6th time today.
Oh, wow.
6. I hope I'm getting...
Congratulations.
I apologize if I'm forgetting anybody, but yeah.
That's wonderful. A little bit more prosperity in your life, so to speak. Well, today, excited about what we're going to be covering today, but would you mind doing a brief overview, recap of the first 3 episodes of what we kind of covered so far on the podcast?
Yeah. Episode 1 was just kind of an overview of what we plan to cover. Episode 2 was all about how you can potentially financially sin, and fun little story to open that episode up. And episode 3 was diving deeper into prosperity and all of the different ways that you can prosper within your life.
Exactly. And I think today we're going to be moving from, we kind of were in the more theoretical in the first few episodes and thinking about moving from how to think about our financial lives and just our lives in general. And today we're going to get a little bit more practical and move into what to actually do. What are the actual steps that I can take to start making progress on this journey towards prosperity? And we don't see prosperity as the lottery ticket or winning the slot machine or whatever it might be. It's a long road, paved with struggle, humility, and just good old-fashioned discipline. So today's goal is we want to walk you down that road, and we want to kind of show you what we think are the best steps that you can take to set yourself up for financial prosperity in your life by doing the next best thing with your dollars that you can do. And so what we're trying to do is build a stable financial life, and we want to help you do that today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're definitely going to get more practical, but it's also not personalized to anybody. So
right.
If you want to discuss more thoroughly, feel free to give us a call.
Of course. Yeah. Our conviction that we say all the time is that we can't give personal financial advice without knowing the person. So we would love to do that with anybody that's interested. But today is going to be more broad level financial principles that you can apply to your life and consider where you might be on this journey and what you can do next.
Good rules of thumb.
Yeah. And so before we get into that, we kind of want to, again, just briefly talk about prosperity. And if you haven't listened to episode 3 yet, go back and listen to it because it's a real deep dive into prosperity in general, not just financial prosperity, but what that looks like across your entire life. But we believe that it's more than financial health. And in fact, it's much more than financial health. Though today we want to kind of target a little bit more specifically the financial piece of it and how you can take steps to get into a more prosperous situation. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." So with that, we're going to we're going to walk through this process, which we call the path to prosper. It's kind of our version of these financial steps that will get you kind of on the right track with your finances. So we'll just go step by step. And the first one is generosity. And the question is pretty simple. Do you give? Are you giving to your church? Are you giving to charities? Are you just giving to others, your friends and family, as you see the opportunities? It's kind of the first question you need to answer for yourself.
Yeah, and we'll get more detailed on this in further episodes and kind of more creative ways you can do it. But it's again, there's a reason it's number one. It's absolutely what you should start with, so that money's not kind of lording over you.
Right.
Kind of break that power of money first off, just to kind of prioritize everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we believe that starting with giving is the right move here because too many people, I think, probably if they're honest with themselves, get all their needs first, like all the bills that they have to pay, which makes sense. Let's get those situated. And then I want to spend my money how I want to spend it. And then if there's some left over, I'll give that. We don't think that you should do that. We think you should start with giving even before you prioritize paying off your bills. We think this should come from a heart of trusting God and from just having this generous joy. We have a few verses that kind of speak to this. I'll start with, if you want to get 2 Corinthians 9:7, I'm going to read Proverbs 3, verse 9 that says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all of your produce."
You read that too fast.
Sorry.
2 Corinthians 9:7 says, "Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver."
So we're not going to put a number on it. Like, so I think there, some might say 10%. There's an Old Testament passage, I don't have it off the top of my head, that speaks to that level of giving. I don't think we're necessarily bound by that as a kind of any kind of law requirement in the New Covenant, but the 2 Corinthians passage says to kind of give as you've decided in your heart. This is going to be kind of on a person-by-person basis, I think, how much you think you should be giving. Yeah,
I think it's certainly based on conviction. I'll say that personally, I start at 10%.
Yeah.
That number is in the Bible for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I just think it's kind of the best place to start.
Yeah.
I will say that we get that question a decent amount. One of the other questions is, well, do you do it pre-tax or post-tax? I would say that's another conviction, personal conviction that you need to kind of wrestle with on your own. Those are probably two of the big questions we get when discussing giving.
Yeah, I agree. I think 10% is kind of a good measuring stick for you to, like, if you're giving 1% and you think, oh, that's good enough, and then you kind of do the calculation and you realize, oh, I'm actually only giving 1%, and that's not even close to 10%. That might be a sign that perhaps you're not quite giving enough, where you're really trusting God with it because you're still wanting to keep it for yourself. I think giving should, I want to say, hurt a little bit, but the 2 Corinthians passage does talk about doing it with this cheerful heart. Like, it's not a painful thing to give, even to a point where it's stretching you. I think it should be a joyful thing, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians. I do want to read one more, and I mentioned this in the first episode. I think it was the first episode, but it's just a story of Cain and Abel, and I think it's an important one because it says that in the course of time, this is Genesis 4, verse 3, In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. It's clear in the passage that Cain's just kind of giving whatever at some point from the fruit, whereas Abel is giving the first and the best of his flocks to the Lord, and he's not holding it back for himself. He is freely giving what the Lord has blessed him with, and trusting that the Lord will provide more in return, or not let him go hungry or anything like that. Whereas Cain seems to have this like, I'm just going to keep as much as I can, and then I'll give a little bit at some point. It says in the course of time he brought his offering. So we do believe that doing this with the first fruits, you get a paycheck, make the first thing you think about, how can I give some of this?
Yeah, I think I also mentioned this in a previous episode, but if not, I also like the mindset, which I read, I think, relatively recently, of kind of flipping the script, and instead of thinking how much can I give of mine, it's kind of flip the script and think how much of God's do I keep.
Right. Yeah, I think that was R.G. Letourneau that mentality, and he gave away 90% of his income.
Right.
That's giving. We are going to do a deep dive on giving at some point and kind of do a whole episode that talks about what charitable giving can look like in your life. But briefly, I think the first step is an important one, is check yourself and ask yourself, am I really giving? Am I giving enough? Do I need to give more? Are there places where I could be more useful in giving for the kingdom?
Yeah, definitely.
So the second one is, this is kind of a question that you need to, it's a simple one, is if you have a spouse or dependents, what we're going to talk about next. But more specifically, is there anybody in your life that's dependent on your income? Because there's something that you need to do here to protect them in the worst case scenario that we see as a super, super critical part of the process. And that's just making sure that you are properly insured. Because you don't want to leave your loved ones, your little children, or your spouse without any income if something were to happen to you.
So what would you tell somebody if they asked you, well, how do I make sure I'm properly insured?
There's a lot of ways to do it. We would be happy to talk to you about what that would look like specifically and kind of give you our best recommendation. But I think a good starting place is 10 times your salary. Whatever the income you're bringing in, that you yourself are bringing in for you and your family, multiply that by 10, and that's kind of give you a general good sense of what you might be looking to need. But everybody's going to be different. You're going to have to kind of evaluate it for yourself. If your spouse works and they can cover some of that loss with some of their own working, if they stay at home, you might need to be more insured. You need to kind of evaluate it. Are you paying for college? Do you have debts that you need to cover? There's a lot of things that go into it, but I think just a good starting place would maybe be 10 times your salary. Do
you go to Google or ChatGPT to figure out how to do that? How to actually get the insurance?
No. I mean, there's lots of places where you could go to get the insurance. We at Stonecrop, we don't do any insurance. We don't sell insurance, but we have trusted agents that we would be able to refer people to if you ever were interested in that. That we trust in. We don't get any kickback or anything from that. It's important that we have set ourselves up to not get any kind of commissions on those things. We believe in what we do for our own thing, but we'll recommend somebody.
I was trying to set you up and doing a poor job of it. I think like any industry, there can be good people who sell and not so good people who sell.
Yeah.
So make sure that you are talking to somebody you trust.
Yeah.
Because there are also lots of different types of insurance policies out there.
Yeah.
And you can accidentally get into one that's hard to get out of, that's too expensive and hard to get out of.
Yeah. What would you recommend somebody in terms of what kind of life insurance to get here? What would you recommend they do?
Yeah, certainly when you're starting, and in most cases, we recommend 20 to 30 year term.
Yeah. Not a whole life policy.
Right.
The reason is especially if you're young, like if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're kind of just getting started, maybe starting to build your family, you probably don't already have $1 million in your portfolio that your family could live off of, if I had to guess. So there's this important period of time while you're working and trying to accumulate the wealth that you need to eventually retire and eventually essentially be self-insured, Well, you don't have that yet. And so you need to cover this period of time, which is probably 20 or 30 years for most people, where if something were to happen to you and the worst possible situation happened, the insurance could kick in and protect your family in that event. So that's the biggest need we see is in that period of time where you haven't yet accumulated the assets to cover yourself.
Right. And as you were speaking, it just kind of made me think of something else that we're trying to help people do is create generational wealth. So if you're able to do that in the best scenario, and you haven't inherited generational wealth, well, if you use a cheap insurance policy and then you build a portfolio, you can potentially leave that to the next generation or 2 generations down or whatever, and then they won't even need an insurance policy because they are that person with $1 million after you've eventually left it to them.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those things that it's a necessity that we kind of need to talk about. One of the other reasons for term life that we believe it's so much more affordable to pay the monthly premiums than if you were to get into some big whole life policy. They're very expensive. And so you can get a pretty decent amount of coverage with term life and have really reasonable payments. And it just gives you the peace of mind that, okay, I've got a wife and 2 small children. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, they're going to be okay, at least financially. I don't want to. It's going to be traumatic enough for them to lose their father, but they're at least not going to be in financial distress as well. On top of that, so we have to talk about it. We think you should really get that taken care of, but it really is only if you have other people dependent on your income specifically. If you're single, probably don't need to worry about it right now, except for unless you maybe wanted to cover like funeral costs, so that burden doesn't fall on your parents or any other family members or something like that.
And in that case, a lot of times work covers that much.
Yeah.
So take a look at your work policy if you have one.
Yeah. Yep.
And I can't remember who it was, but one of the, I would say he was probably 16 to 1700s, but one of the, maybe in 1500s, I think it was one of the reformers, talked about 1 Timothy 5:8 and applying that to life insurance as well.
Yeah.
Which was surprising. I don't know how long life insurance has been around, but that's just part of providing for your household.
Yeah. I'll briefly read 1 Timothy 5:8. So then, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Super strong language there. So it just speaks to the importance of this, that you take care of your family, not just in this life, but you're prepared in case something really terrible happens to you, and they're at least going to be okay. So,
yeah.
Any other thoughts there?
No, I think we covered that one pretty well.
Yeah. All right, step 3. So that's step 1 was giving. Step 2 is insurance, protecting what matters. And then the next one is asking this question: does your employer offer a 401k or some kind of retirement plan match, such as you have to contribute 5% in order to get 5% from the company as well? It's just a simple thing that you look into, and if they do, don't leave that money on the table because it's free money.
I'm going to caveat this one a little bit. A lot of people have heard the term house poor. They buy a house, but they can't afford anything else because they bought too much house. Make sure that you're not retirement account poor either. So if you can barely feed your family, but you're doing 10% in your 401k because you get that much match, that would be a very generous match. But just make sure that you're not neglecting other things, but thinking, oh, well, my retirement plan looks incredible.
Right. Yeah, I think that one is dependent on what the match is. I've seen some that are really ridiculous and kind of shady, to be honest, where the person, to fully maximize the company's match, the person would have to actually max out their 401k, which is probably unreasonable for a lot of young people to contribute $23,000 to their retirement account every year just to get a small return from their company. Like they only do 0.25%, but up to the maximum for you. Like, we're not talking about that necessarily. I think the standard that we would see is like, if you contribute 3%, we'll match 3%. Something to that extent. Something much more reasonable is kind of what we're talking about here. And that's 100% return that we're talking about, where if you're contributing 3, you get another 3 on top of it. So you basically get to double what you're putting into it. That's more what we're talking about. So it is kind of a case-by-case thing. We'd be happy to talk to you about your specific situation. But for your kind of your standard employer match, just make sure you're not leaving free money on the table if it's within reason.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
I don't have a verse for this one. This one's more just kind of a general.
Just use your brain.
Yeah. Somebody's offering you money. Don't say, no, thanks.
Right.
And just, sure.
Yeah.
There's no real catch here. It's just, you should probably do that.
And it's a way to potentially self-insure for the future.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think most people, their 401ks is probably their best retirement building vehicle.
Right.
The next one is kind of a step and a half almost. We think that it's important to build up. We're going to get to an emergency fund in a couple of steps, but before we get to kind of a fully funded emergency fund, I think it's important that you have some kind of an emergency fund, a starter emergency fund. The general recommendation, which again we'll cover in a couple steps, is 3 to 6 months of living expenses, depending on if you're a dual income family or just a single income family, or what that looks like for you. It'd be somewhere between 3 and 6 months. But to start with, we think you should maybe get closer to just 1 month of living expenses. So you've gotten these first 3 steps taken care of. You can knock the first 3 out in a day. You can start giving right away. You can start the process to get life insurance, and you can make sure that you're getting the employer match. Here's where we're going to start the kind of the longer process of building the wealth that we need to. And the first thing you should probably do is just make sure you, in some kind of savings account, probably a high yield savings account is what we would recommend, have about a month's worth of living expenses, so that something happens, if you lose your job, you have a month's buffer to be able to protect your family.
Yeah, and the high yield savings account is, is similar to at least the thought behind it is similar to the 401k. If somebody's going to give you money, take it. If you're keeping a lot of money in your checking account and you're not getting any money from it, you're not making barely any interest on that, versus a high yield savings account, which you can find on, I think it's like bankrate.com. Right. You can find some good recommendations and things like that. But yeah, again, if somebody's going to give you money, take it.
Yeah. So we think kind of the first thing you probably need to do here is an inventory of your overall expenses. Make sure you're clear on how much you're actually taking home on a month-to-month basis. And if you've just added this 401k match and it's actually dinging your take-home pay a little bit, you'll kind of have to redo this. And let's kind of bring out your take-home pay, and then you list all your bills, the things that you absolutely have to pay. Let's take care of that. Let's account for things like groceries that are a little bit more variable, but still things that you have to do to be able to provide for yourself and your family. And then what you would kind of consider your overall general expenses that are maybe a little bit more on the want side of things. Get all those taken care of, and then whatever extra cash flow you have, hopefully there's extra margin here. We would always encourage that you're underspending so that there's still margin at the end of the day. You use that to build this emergency fund. You throw all of that, as much as you possibly can, into this emergency fund until you've got 1 month of those essential living expenses taken care of.
Yeah. Again, the thought is this time you're not hit by the proverbial bus, but you're given what do they call it? Pink slip or something?
Right.
It's kind of before my time.
Yeah.
Now it seems to be like, remember the horror stories during COVID of people just getting like a Zoom meeting on their calendar and showing up and like 50 people get fired.
Yeah.
But in that case, can you still provide for your family?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you're in a really if your job is kind of a niche thing, and it would take you a while to find a job, this is another thing to consider. How much of an emergency fund? And again, we'll get to that, a fully funded emergency fund in a few steps. So this 1 month is really just a starter, because we'll get back and have a more robust emergency fund in a couple steps. But let's start with 1 month, and then we'll move on to the next step, which is getting rid of any high interest debt. So we would consider this anything over 5%-ish right now. That if it's over that, you should probably consider ways that you can knock that down. And we're not talking about your mortgage. We're talking about credit cards, high car payments that have a pretty high interest rate.
Line of credit.
Yeah.
Home equity line of credit. Yeah, things like that.
Let's knock those down next. So once you got that 1 month of living expenses with whatever that cash flow was, let's now take that cash flow and let's throw it at the debt. Mm-hmm. To two main ways you can do that, what are called the debt snowball or the debt avalanche. Do you want to explain how each of those are?
Yeah, the debt snowball, people are probably more familiar with that one because it's a big. Did Dave Ramsey create that, or?
I don't know. He's definitely a proponent of it.
Yeah. So it's tackling the smallest debts first, and then once you essentially defeat the smallest debt, you take whatever that minimum payment was and apply it to the next smallest, and essentially you're just taking the minimum payments and snowballing them into the next continually the next smallest debts, and just continuing that snowball. The avalanche is tackling the highest interest rate debts first, and then kind of going down from there. So if you've got a 15% interest rate, tackle that first, and then if you've got a 10%, once you have tackled the 15%, then go for the 10. So you had two different theories where I would say the debt snowball kind of psychologically better for some people.
Yeah.
It just feels like you're beating it more. But in the long run, the debt avalanche, you might actually end up paying less in debt because of the interest rates.
Yeah. Yeah, and we might even recommend some kind of hybrid where if you've got a fairly small balance in debt, maybe start with that one to get that quick win that makes you feel like, oh, wow, I'm actually making progress here. And then let's go ahead and start with the higher interest ones and start going from there. Again, this is going to kind of depend on everybody's situation, but some kind of a hybrid could work too for certain situations. Excuse me. This is the kind of the first real progress that you're going to be making on your overall, we'll call it your net worth, because once you're starting to build cash in the emergency fund and then pay down debt, you're increasing your assets and reducing your liabilities. And that little net worth at the bottom of your statement is going to continue to grow. And that's when we're starting to we'll be cooking with gas once we start getting rid of this debt.
Promise I'm better at financial planning than I am at drinking water.
That's okay. I think you're great at drinking water for what it's worth.
Dribbling it down my shirt.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm going to read Proverbs 22, verse 7. I think everybody's heard this verse before, but the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. We don't want you to be a slave to anybody. So let's get out of this debt. Let's pay it down. Let's get aggressive with it, but not before we get a little bit of emergency fund going. And then we'll get real aggressive with that debt. Let's knock it out, get rid of it. And then suddenly we'll have that extra cash flow freed up from the first stage, that first emergency fund, but then we'll also have all those minimum payments that we were making on our debts. Those are now freed up too. And you'll see that you can build an emergency fund, a fully funded emergency fund pretty quickly, which is our next step. And that's building a 3 to 6 month cash reserve so that you're prepared for any kind of catastrophe.
Yeah. Again, if something bad happens in the job markets, labor markets, economy, make sure that you can pay those debts still. So, make sure you're saving up enough of a buffer that you can sustain yourself for a longer period of time.
Yep. So this is kind of when you start to get some relief in your finances. Everything to this point, you still maybe feel a little bit tight because all of your extra cash is going towards the debt payments, and it doesn't feel like you're making progress, even though you are. But then you start to see a bank account start to grow, and you start to feel this relief because you finally got some breathing room and some margin in your life.
You go from barely treading water to actually feeling like you're swimming.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about how do you decide 3 months, 6 months of living expenses? How do we make this decision?
You had mentioned part of that earlier. If you've, again, got that niche job and it would be hard to replace your income if something were to happen, then you want more of you want to go kind of more to the 6 month. If your expenses are relatively high, I'd say you probably want to be a little bit more conservative with how much, so probably closer to 6 month. What else?
If you're a single income family, like if you're a father and your wife stays at home with kids, 6 months, probably the better move, because you don't want her to have to go back to work or anything like that. Like if that's kind of how you've set up your lifestyle. If you're a dual income family where both spouses are working, you could probably do more like 3 months. If only one of you loses your job, you still at least have the other to kind of help keep your head above water for a little bit.
If you have high discretionary expenses, you could probably be closer to 3 months, because assuming that if something bad were to happen, you could cut out a ton and still make it.
That's actually a good point. I do think it's important to make this, when we're talking about living expenses, I think it is kind of your, what do you need to survive?
Yeah.
You're not still going out to dinner when
Right.
this happens. This is like break the glass in case of an emergency. I still need to pay my electricity bill. I still need to feed my family, not at the nice restaurant, but with the groceries. So you're cutting things down. I can get rid of Netflix if I lose my job. I can get rid of that subscription. We are kind of talking about strict essential living expenses that your family needs just to survive. So it actually makes it easier to save up for it, because it's probably less than what your overall living expenses probably are, because you do have some discretionary spending that you probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think back to the cold opening and how James Braddock was walking 10 miles a day just to find some place to work so his family could survive. You can make sure you prioritize this step in the process to make sure your family's going to be okay.
Right.
This isn't the Great Depression. It's better than that. So we can get a good thing going here. And I'll read Proverbs 6 that speaks to this a little bit. Proverbs 6. You've heard this one before too. We've read it on the podcast. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. The ant is preparing for the winter that's coming and making sure that in the summertime, when she can build this some level of protection, she's doing it. And we think the same thing should happen for all of us, that just in case, we're prepared.
And where would you put the 3 to 6 months? You said you would put it in Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin, all Bitcoin, the riskiest investment that you could think of. Just
That
kidding.
is not advice.
We can't say that. No.
Do not put it in Bitcoin.
Don't do that. High yield savings account.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, don't even just find like the highest yielding savings account. Like, you can go to Bankrate and compare all these. We wouldn't even recommend. Just choose the one with the highest interest rate, because they can change them at any time.
Right.
I think it's important to kind of a combination of that with a reputable bank that you've heard of before. You know, we won't make an official recommendation or anything like that, but use your own discretion and judgment there. Don't just pick the one that you've never heard of with the highest interest rate, because tomorrow they'll probably drop it to 1%.
Yeah, or it could be mom and pop bank in Nebraska who's just providing the highest interest rate and doing that to continue to try to survive. And we'll get a bunch of deposits because we got the highest interest rate.
Right.
Yeah, definitely reputable. You choose a reputable bank.
Yes. All right. So at this point, we have taken care of the initial things. We've started giving. We've protected our family with some insurance. We've made sure we've not left any money on the table with our 401ks. We've gotten rid of some debt. We've built an emergency fund. And now, this is kind of a big question for a lot of younger people in particular. Do we buy a house? Are we renting right now? Do we want to buy a house? Is that part of our goal? We would see this next step as part of that process for you, is when to start prioritizing the home. We think you should probably do these other steps first, because if you're over leveraged or have too much debt, when you add a mortgage on top of that could be problematic. So ideally, you would get rid of your debt and have it a fully funded emergency fund before you start saving and getting into a house.
Right. Yeah. And kind of our overall rule of thumb is 10 to 20%. The 20% is typically the way that you avoid PMI, which we think is a good move, which is private mortgage insurance. But check with your bank. I was actually talking to somebody else the other day who, I think at 10% they were able to avoid PMI. So yeah, overall that's kind of why the recommendation is typically 20. But yeah, just try to avoid that PMI.
I agree. If you can, that's great. In the current market, and we're recording this in 2025, it's a little tough to get to that point. And we recognize that. And
rates are high and prices are high.
Right. So there are some that might say, without exception, 20% down and a 15-year mortgage. We do not say that. We think that the more important question that you have to answer is, how much is that mortgage payment going to be? And that helps you determine how much house can I afford. And then you kind of have these toggles with, well, how much down payment do I need to get such and such a mortgage payment? Because we think, at least this is my conviction, your monthly mortgage payment shouldn't be any more than 30%. And that's the absolute max that I think it should be of your gross income. Somewhere in the 25 to 30% range, I think, is a healthy number. Obviously, anything less than that is great, but you do not want to be house rich and cash poor, where you're 40%, 50% of your income is going towards a housing payment. That's the biggest thing that you need to prioritize. And if you're doing a 15-year mortgage, that's going to be really, really tough because obviously that's going to be a higher mortgage payment. So
enjoy that spam for the next 15 years.
Yeah. So we think the wiser thing to consider is making sure that monthly payment is at a healthy number. And then you can kind of backtrack from there and figure out what can I put down. We definitely think it's important not to touch that emergency fund. That's not your down payment money. You need to protect that for the emergencies. You're building a new savings account for the down payment in particular. Good.
And depending on the timeline, your overall timeline, it doesn't necessarily have to be in high yield savings. If you're 22 and you think, oh, by 30 I want to buy a house, you can take on a little bit more risk because you've got a longer time horizon as well.
True. Yeah. That's where a good taxable brokerage account can come into play, where you can actually get some invested money working for you, but it's still liquid and you have access to it, and it's not in a retirement account. I could be crazy, but I think even less than 10% on a down payment can be okay for some people for their first home. But
I think I did 5%.
Yeah. There's something like if you were in the Army or some kind of military veteran with the VA loans, you can go with 0% down. And if you can make the mortgage payment fit in that 25 to 30% of your income, I think that's okay. Because it's a tough market. And
make sure you're considering everything, because you end up with a mortgage payment, principal and interest, but then you end up with, you need homeowners insurance, right, and you've got to pay taxes.
Yep.
So make sure you're considering everything.
All of that stuff is included with that 25 to 30% number for sure. So don't stress out when you start thinking about, you look on Zillow and you see these $100,000 houses don't look very nice. I want to live in something nicer. And then you start calculating 20% down on that's like $100,000, whatever it is. Maybe not that much, but don't stress so much about, I have to get to 20%. I think that's a great goal to shoot for, but it is okay for your very first home to put a little bit less down, as long as you're still staying within that healthy range. For any subsequent homes, 20% down is the minimum, because you have a home to sell with equity.
Right. Hopefully. Depending on the market you're selling in.
Yeah. We also think if you buy a house, prepare to live in it for at least 5 years, if not significantly longer, so that you can actually build the equity.
Right.
Don't buy a house and just be like, yeah, I can always move in 2 to 3 years. Do not do that.
At the same time, though, I don't love the mindset of going out and finding your first home and requiring it be your forever home.
Not at all. Yeah, not saying that, but it's just, you will probably lose money if you do it too soon. So be prepared to stay in it for a few years if you're going to buy it. Otherwise, just keep renting. If you really are that concerned about having the flexibility to move in the future, or you're waiting for something better, just keep saving and keep renting is what I would think.
Renting gets a bad rap because you're just writing somebody a check. But during the first year I was a homeowner, my wife and I had a bunch of expenses. Our shower leaked into the garage. We're thinking, oh man, we missed that landlord we could just tell to come fix it.
Yeah. If you're renting right now, there's real estate agents love to use this. You're just throwing your money away. Well, when you buy a house, you're just throwing your money away on the maintenance request that you have to suddenly take care of yourself. You're just throwing your money away at property taxes that you did not have to pay before. You're just throwing your money away at the interest rate on your mortgage payment that you didn't have to pay before. So there's money that you never see again. You're not just building equity when you're in a house. So
there are pros and cons to both.
Absolutely. So don't be ashamed if you're renting. It's okay. And you have the ultimate flexibility to continue to save and move kind of at your leisure. So that's the next one. Buying a house. Make sure you know what you can afford. You're focused on keeping that mortgage payment reasonable. And then, that's what we think you should do next.
And real quick on that,
yeah.
For people on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think too many times Christians think, oh, well, that person's house is too big. They call themselves a Christian. I don't think it's wrong to buy a large home either. I knew a couple who bought a large home specifically because they enjoy hosting and they wanted to do church events at their house and things like that. So we're also just want to make that quick clarification as
Absolutely. Well. Yeah. And living in good neighborhoods for your kids that are safe and that costs more money. And that really is okay. We're not talking about buying mansions. We're talking about just building good old fashioned roots, within reason and buying what you can afford. But it is okay. If you have a vision and saying, I really want a house in this neighborhood with kind of looks like this, you just might have to save more and take more time to do it, but that's okay. That's an okay goal. I'll read real quick Jeremiah 29. I read this. It's kind of where the name of our podcast even comes from, but it's starting in verse 5. It says, build houses and live in them. To be clear, the Lord is talking to exiles right now. So they're not in their homeland, but they're not going to be able to go back to their homeland for, I think it's another 70 years. And God says, He's not telling them, so that's what it is, deal with it. He has these encouraging words for them. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives, have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons. Give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters, and you have grandchildren. Multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. For thus says the Lord of hosts. So we're talking about just building these roots and settling down and being here for the long haul. I think it's an important thing to have those roots in your where you're living.
You keep saying roots, and now I can't get dig your roots by Florida Georgia Line out of my head. It's going to be stuck in my head the rest of the day.
Why don't you sing it for us?
I don't think anybody wants to hear that.
Fine.
Gotta dig your roots.
Nice. That's what I'm talking about. I was not expecting him to do it. Now I expect that on every episode is some song from Logan.
It's the one and only.
All right. So you've bought your house. Congratulations. We're now on step 7, or maybe it's step 8. I can't remember. We're now going to start building, and we're ready to invest now. It took this whole time, but now we're ready beyond our 401k. Let's start hyper accumulating our wealth and building this in specific accounts. And this is where Logan and I maybe have some disagreements. Where do you put this money? You go on Schwab or Fidelity or some Vanguard, whatever, and you see there's a lot of different types of accounts. Where do we even start?
Real quick, I also think this is the one that's too often prioritized, or I guess prioritized in the wrong manner, because people have tons of debt, but they'll be like, oh, well, I've got my $1,000 Robinhood account that I love placing a trade and seeing the balloons or whatever. I don't have Robinhood, but I know at some point they had some kind of animation whenever you place a trade. But yeah, make sure you're prioritizing it right.
Yeah. So we would think kind of a good first step would maybe be maximizing a Roth IRA.
Yeah, potentially, depending on your situation, but based on the tax benefits of a Roth IRA, everything is going in post-tax, and you're never paying tax on it again.
Which is pretty sweet.
Yeah. If you are very successful at investing, all of that investment gain is not taxed either.
Right. Once you're 59 and a half. This is a retirement account. So it's what the R stands for in the IRA. So you can't touch it. If you need liquidity, this is maybe not the account to start with. If you're thinking about things that you need to use in the midterm, there's other types of accounts for that.
The Roth you can touch, but we don't advise people touch it.
Right. Agree. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We love the tax-free nature of it, though, that you are saving into an account that will never be taxed again.
And thinking of it as a retirement account.
And also as a legacy account, because if you pass away 60 years from now with this account, you pass that on to your kids, and guess what? They don't have to pay taxes on it either. If you've got after-tax accounts, pre-tax accounts like 401ks or traditional IRAs, that the government wants its money on that.
Per current tax law, they're paying that tax within 10 years.
Right. So a Roth IRA is a great account. There's income limits here, so you got to be mindful of that. In the current year, it's something like $236,000 for households. If you're married, if you file your taxes jointly with your spouse.
And it starts phasing, right? It's not just a...
Right. Yeah. So look into that, depending on what year you're listening to this. If it's in the future, it'll be different.
You can also potentially get creative there, which we're happy to help with.
Yeah, the backdoor Roth is a great option. There's things that you need to be aware of there, but yeah, there's income limits, and then there's also just contribution limits. In the current year, it's $7,000 if you're under 50.
And then $8,000
if you're over 50.
Yeah.
Yep. So you've got the catch-up contributions there. But there's a reason the government limits how much you can put in there, because these are pretty great accounts. You can't just put infinite amount of money in there because the government
does want taxes.
Yeah. And again, you do pay taxes on this. It's just money you've already paid taxes on.
Right.
And you put it in there and you never have to pay taxes again. Okay. Here's where it's going to get a little interesting because we disagree on this next account. But it's another really awesome tax-free account, and that not everybody has one or has access to one. So we'll talk about that in a second. But it's a health savings account or an HSA. I love them. Logan.
Blah.
Is it really blah?
No, it's not blah. I'm exaggerating.
Okay. But I'll briefly share why I love them.
Although you use them if you're blah.
What?
Sick.
Oh, yes, true. I'll briefly share why I love them. Logan can share why he thinks maybe they're not the greatest or as great as it seems. I love them because if you love the Roth IRA and you love that tax-free dollars growing, well, an HSA actually gives you extra tax benefits where you actually get to put in pre-tax money into it. And then you can invest that money and it grows tax-free. And then when you take out that money for qualified medical purposes, it's also tax-free. So it's a triple tax advantage account that really no other account has that degree of tax efficiency in it. And it's amazing. There's not income limits. It's contribution limits. You do have to have a specific kind of healthcare plan to qualify for it, and that's be a high deductible healthcare plan. But if you have those, and maybe your employer has you can get this kind of plan and get an HSA with it, I say do it. And I say do whatever you can to put as much money as you can into it and max it out every year, is my opinion.
And what if you don't need qualified medical expenses?
Who doesn't need qualified medical expenses in retirement?
What if you are healthy up until 80 and then you're hit by a bus?
I think we should determine how much you should put in there, because you definitely don't, this is not a great legacy account to leave to your kids, right? It's not like a Roth IRA. So this is an account that you eventually, by the end of your life, you do kind of want to have spent down. So we could do an episode where we figure out how much that would be for any given person and try to get it to that level throughout your working career and then get no more. But I do think when you get older, your medical issues don't get less. And there's so many things that qualify for it. That's what's so amazing is like we use it for so many things even in our house that you'd be surprised. It's not like you just need it to go to the doctor or you get surgery or anything like that. Like you go to
I feel like I always walk around CVS or whatever and see HSA qualified or whatever.
Yeah, more and more I see it on Amazon. I buy something and it's like, this is HSA eligible. Well, that's great. So why else are you sort of not against it, but you're cautious with it?
Why else? You can, I think you can be more flexible with the Roth IRA. As far as what you can, like, you've got the $10,000 loophole for the Roth IRA if you're buying a house. I don't know. The medical thing is the big one. Here's
the thing, the real like life hack way to use an HSA is to not touch it. It's to let it grow, right? So
yeah, because can't you pay for something in Medicare? Can you use it for Medicare?
I should have prepared for that. I actually don't know.
We'll figure that one out.
I don't think you can.
Okay,
but what you can do with it, and this is really cool, once you have an HSA, let's say you establish one today, and tomorrow you go to the doctor and it costs $200. Don't use your HSA for it. Pay for it out of your cash flow, but save that receipt. You store that away somewhere safe. Then you go to the doctor again, and it's another $500. Don't use your HSA. Pay for it out of your cash, and then save that receipt too. And then sometime down the road, If you've been saving all these receipts for all your medical purchases for years and years and years, you can get reimbursed anytime, tax-free. There's no expiration to it. You can just be accumulating all these receipts this whole time and get reimbursed down the road. So when you are in retirement and you go, hey, I'm pretty healthy, I'm not going to need all this HSA money. Good thing I've been saving all these receipts, because now I can just take this money out cash-free and I can go buy a Lamborghini.
So you got the HSA addict over there and somebody who is a little more lukewarm about them. So, and we're both financial professionals, so sometimes there aren't complete rules of thumb, or sometimes the advice isn't concrete.
I will say one final thing.
You know what I'm trying to say.
One final caution that I do recognize is there is a tendency to not do that and to just spend out of your HSA because you can. Because you go to the doctor and it's, well, that was more than I thought. You go to the dentist. I don't quite have the cash to pay for it. I'm going to use my HSA. And so you end up using this investment account and you're kind of constantly spending out of it. So it's still helpful and it's nice to have that, especially when you have young kids who break their leg all the time or whatever they might do, to have the ability to pay for these things without dipping into cash or certainly getting into debt and using a credit card to pay for an emergency room visit or something like that. It's nice to have the HSA to be able to do that. But that is one downside, is that it's almost so flexible and you can use it for so many things that you're tempted to do it and you actually end up spending way more out of your HSA than you probably should be. And you're certainly not doing the thing where you're accumulating these receipts. So I will acknowledge that that is a real temptation when you have one, is to use it all the time.
Yeah, you might go to doctors that don't take regular insurance and just, well, it's fine, I've got my HSA.
Exactly. Is that what you guys do?
We'll leave that one up to the listener.
All right, finally, so if you kind of, we're talking about these tax advantage accounts. I think from there, probably starting to throw some extra cash flow in some kind of taxable account is probably a good move, because this is where you get real liquidity in your investments. But I think it's a great account to have a pretty substantial amount in. It's just your run-of-the-mill taxable brokerage account.
Yeah, and that's where you can do fun things like tax loss harvesting and
absolutely
potentially have less of a tax burden at the end of the year.
If you're planning on retiring retiring early, maybe before 59, maybe in your early 50s, mid 50s, this is a super important account to have.
Yeah, what's the new trend called? FIRE? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Financial independence, retire early or whatever.
Yeah. If you're one of those people,
a taxable investment account will save you because you can withdraw from it without penalty. Whereas if you have a 401k that's growing and you retire at age 50, well, you can't pull that money out without paying hefty penalties on it. You can at 55. There's a rule of 55 that you could do, but if you're planning on retiring any earlier than that, you should have a pretty substantial taxable account.
Yeah.
And then maxing out a 401k. If you've gotten to that point where you've maxed out Roth IRAs and HSAs and put a substantial amount in a taxable account, and then you still have extra cash to throw at investments, go back and max out that 401k if you have one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And depending on what you are, if you're a business owner, you can even potentially get a little bit creative on those kind of things, your limits and everything. So, make sure you're looking into all that.
Yeah. All right. One final step, and that is getting rid of the low interest debt, and that more specifically getting rid of your mortgage. To this point, we wouldn't recommend paying extra to your mortgage to try to pay that off early. I think that can come later, and once you've gotten all these other things taken care of, then you can knock out that mortgage.
Yeah, and I would say that's even potentially a more of a preference thing. I bought in 2022, so I'm not one of those with a 3% mortgage or whatever. But if I did have a 3% mortgage and I got to step 8, I might not choose to pay off my mortgage because it's 3%.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of a good way to gauge that is what are you expecting to return in your investments compared to how much is the interest rate on your mortgage. If your interest rate is 3% and you generally are expecting to return more than that in your investments, well, then it kind of does make sense to continue to put your extra money towards those as opposed to paying off the debt. You'll theoretically be leaving returns on the table if you did that.
Yeah, and the reason that one of the reasons that we're not as against mortgage as well is, well, again, the Bible says, don't be slave to the debtor, the lender. Don't be slave to the lender. But I think with a mortgage, there's a little bit of flexibility there because you're not really slave to the lender because if something happened, you could always sell your house and then pay it all back.
Agreed. Yeah. That's the whole like good debt versus bad debt thing. I think a mortgage is a good example of a debt that is worth taking on to give your family a home and to have some equity that's building in an appreciating asset. Yeah. That is the path to prosper. That's what we would consider to be kind of easy things that you can do to get yourself on the right track financially. Again, this is not super personal financial advice or personal at all. It's very general, and we did that on purpose because we can't really give personal financial advice to a broad audience. Yeah. So if you have more interest in talking about this in your own life and what this could look like for you, we would love to talk to you and kind of build a financial plan for your specific situation. But
because in each of these steps, you can also get a lot more detailed based on a certain situation, anybody's certain situation.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there was a lot of things that we could have said about all of these, but that's what we would consider just general overview of what do I do next? I've done this so far. What's next for me? And if you kind of follow those steps, we think you'll kind of be on a great trajectory. So this is what prosperity looks like financially. You're giving, you're protecting your family, you've got the margin, you're not just paycheck to paycheck and you're stressed, you're not ruled by debt, you're not a slave to the lender, and you're building wealth. And you're not doing this to hoard and just protect yourself and all these things. I mean, it is protecting yourself, but you're not just hoarding it away as a miser. You're doing it to bless other people, to bless your family, to bless future generations, to bless others and be able to, I don't know. We've all had that, I think, probably where you've gone out to dinner with somebody that is doing well financially and they just, hey, it's on me tonight. No worries. Like, well, thank you. That's a nice thing. To be able to do that for other people would be a great thing. And you can do that by setting yourself up well here.
Yeah, and we just want to continue to help people think of their finances in a spiritual sense.
Yeah,
it's something that God has entrusted you to steward. If I had $1 in my wallet, I would take it out. But I think right now all I have is Dominican pesos that I haven't figured out how to get rid of in 2 years. But yeah, these dollars, God, that aren't in my hand that I just made, are trusted to you by God, and just want to help you steward them well.
Yeah. We're not talking about flaunting your wealth here, just using whatever wealth God's blessed you with to bless others, to bless even yourself in your ways, your family, and to bless others in the kingdom.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, real prosperity just feels like peace. You're not stressed. You're not anxious. You feel peace.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. Well, thanks for listening. We hope you join us again, subscribe, and visit stonecropadvisors.com if you're interested in learning more about what we do and how we can
smash that subscribe
button. And if you don't do it, don't even bother coming back. We don't want you.
We like you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We hope you tune in again. God bless.
God bless.
Investment advisory services offered through Stonecrop Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. This material is intended for informational purposes only.